In communication, is it all about perception?
TED is really all about ideas. The best TED Talks are the really fabulous ideas. And as long as those people are receptive to changing the way they speak to a more engaging manner, then everything goes really, really well.
In the age of AI, why do TEDx talks still matter?
The most widely viewed TED Talks around the world are humorous, engaging, and passionate TED Talks. A TED Talk live in person is always going to be really, really appreciated. When we build a TED event, we're really building that flow.
Hi, welcome to this Signature Leadership Show. I'm Jamie Mason Cohen. Our guest today is my friend, Dirk Daenen. Dirk frequently guest lectures at universities around the world, including UBI Middlesex University, Vietnam National University, the University of Novi Sad in Serbia, Clark University in the US, and Tongji University in China. Alongside his academic work, he regularly coaches and consults for a range of international companies and public sector organizations. Dirk is a huge fan of TED Talks, having hosted or coordinated numerous TEDx events, including the current TEDx Luxembourg City. We met 10 years ago to the month that this is being recorded, where Dirk put on an extraordinary, for me, life-changing TEDx event where I was lucky and honored to be a speaker. He's lived and worked in Brazil, Germany, UK, France, US, and Belgium. And he understood from a young age that cultures are diverse and the people that make them cannot possibly be educated in a one-size-fits-all manner. And a question in his travels that he often asks his students is, in communication, is it all about perception? Which is one of the questions we will explore today. Dirk, it's wonderful to have you. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks a lot. It's a real pleasure. I'm really looking forward to catching up because this has been, as you said, 10 years. Suddenly that just bang. That's incredible, isn't it? That's been a long time.
It's been a long time. And over those 10 years of hosting TEDx from, I believe that might have been one of your first or the opening TEDx that you were involved in. How did you get involved as an organizer of TEDx events?
So you're right. That was the first one I organized. Prior to that, I'd been asked to host a couple of events, actually in Brussels. And, I didn't really know what it was, to be honest, but then being involved in hosting, the people I was meeting, they were just incredible, incredible people. So, I thought to myself, I really, for a number of reasons, I just want to get much more involved, even if it was only just to be around such incredible people more of the time. So yeah, at the university, we got a university license, and we started hosting them. And the students were responsible for organizing. Of course, students are students, so that's notoriously difficult to rely on students to be very, very good at organizing things. So I was probably slightly more involved than I thought I was going to be. But no, it was absolutely a brilliant, brilliant experience. And from that very first one, I just thought about making them bigger and bigger. And in fact, we had the university license first, and then we moved to a city license. And now we have the capital city. So we have TEDx Luxembourg City. And we've been doing that now for quite a few years. And it's gone from a reasonable event around 300 people to about 1,200 was the largest one that we've had so far.
Incredible. What makes an effective TEDx event?
So TED is really all about ideas. And, in the very beginning, when we were starting, we were thinking about who can we get to come and talk. And we were really focused on the person. But then we realized that the really good TED Talks, these aren't famous people. These are just people with a phenomenally good idea. And we facilitate them to come on stage and talk in a manner that is engaging. So what we did was we kind of refocused everything and to really focus on ideas. What are the ideas worth spreading? And then we found that there are some people with exceptional ideas, but weren't very, very good at public speaking. So we spent quite a lot of time coaching certain people, and suddenly they were just coming out with the very, very best TED Talks. So yeah, it's really exciting. I think by no shadow of doubt, the best TED Talks are the really fabulous ideas. And as long as those people are receptive to changing the way they speak to a more engaging manner, then everything goes really, really well.
Can you tell me more about that in terms of what makes a TEDx talk, which really to me is what makes an effective or standout or differentiated keynote talk in that format? What have you learned over those 10 years since we met about what the best talks or the best received talks have in common?
Yeah, so as you say, it is kind of a broader concept, isn't it? It really is about public speaking as a whole, keynote speakers, and how they deliver. So I've actually, my research I've been in academics for 20 odd years, actually well over 20 years. And the majority of my research has been in communication, but actually focused on public speaking. So, and in fact, I'm doing a very, very interesting project at the moment with the Ministry of Education in Luxembourg about teaching public speaking in the best manner to boost the self-confidence of those that you're teaching. So what I find is the very, very best talks, they have a couple of things in common, which are they know how to engage their audience very well. And so there are very clear methods on how to do that. Secondly, the way that they speak, there is a level of passion there. Now, of course, passion, it's really subjective, right? What is passion? But I think over the course of the last however many years, I think it's very, very clear. I think the science is clear as to what is the perception of passion. It's not about whether somebody is truly passionate about something. It's whether the audience believes that they are passionate about what they're talking about. And that perception of passion, again, the science is very clear. It kind of comes down to their voice and the different aspects that they're doing with their voice, and of course, their body language. So between really good voice and really good body language, you can have anybody perceive you to be passionate. And so that's really key. So engaging people, being passionate. And then finally, I think the third thing has to be a really good structure. So if you structure your talk in a particular way, you start with that really attention-grabbing opener, that engaging, the way that you want to start, the way that you want to carry on. And so you need to set the audience up from the very, very beginning. Really clear structure. And I think that's just the recipe to a brilliant TED Talk, or in fact, any keynote speech.
On that note of passion, a friend of mine, Mark Bowden, a well-known speaker in North America, he talks about don't show people your expertise once you're up on stage. Show them how much you care. Now, he's from England initially. One thing when I spoke in Luxembourg was I had spoken to him and other international speakers, and they said, in North America, they sometimes show passion in a different way than they do in Europe. And one of your expertise that I really respect, and I would go to you for advice if I was giving a talk overseas, is the differences in how different cultures might perceive how a speaker shows up with passion. Can you speak about if there are any differences at all in terms of how to present in Europe versus North America? Or are there myths connected to that?
It's funny. I get that question a lot, and there is no doubt that cultural barriers represent real hurdles. Now, having said all of that, and understanding that exists, I'm going to go right out there on a limb and say a good talk is a good talk, period. That's just the way it is. So whether you come across as being passionate, whether you are from Western Europe, whether you're from East Asia, whether you're from South America, at the end of the day, you're going to come across in a particular way, and it's going to be observed. One of the examples I frequently give is if you have a look at really early morning TV here in Europe, so in Luxembourg, if you turn on RTL really early in the morning, you'll see a lot of these shopping channels. So the shopping channels are basically played when there's nothing else on TV, right? So, and what I always found quite curious is that they use the American filmed versions of, you know, somebody trying to sell a vacuum cleaner or whatever else it might be. And so we did an analysis of that at university, and we said, well, why are they doing this? Why are they using these what is perceived to be these over the top Americans trying to sell a vacuum cleaner or a new watch or a piece of jewelry? You know, surely that can't be well received over here. And so we went out and did a little bit of research, and we thought, okay, we're going to try and use a Luxembourger who is rather more conservative in their approach, rather more proper. Well, I say proper, that's rather subjective, but certainly has a certain aura about them, which is less passionate, shall we say? So I'm trying to be polite. So we did, but in fact, what we found is that when people start to watch the shopping channels, when they first turn it on, it might seem like, gosh, you know, that's a bit over the top. In fact, it normalizes very, very, very quickly. And what you find is that human beings just like the enthusiasm. They love the passion behind what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think actually across all cultures, a good talk, a passionate sounding talk is pretty well received. Now, of course, there are intricacies, but I think on the whole, if you're doing a really, really good talk, and if I can refer to TED Talks, you know, there are certain talks, there's certain fundamentals, for example, the use of humor when engaging your audience. Humor, I mean, again, how dangerous can you get to try and use humor? But of course, there are certain rules to humor that work everywhere. You know, it's self-deprecating humor is usually appreciated better than making fun of an audience member, for example. So those types of things can be used. They're widely accepted across cultures. Everybody loves to laugh. So why not use it? When you look at the really good TED Talks, the most widely viewed TED Talks around the world are humorous, engaging, and passionate TED Talks. So there is certainly a lot of intricacies. There definitely are cultural barriers, but I would suggest that anybody coming from North America, Western Europe, Eastern Asia, I think at the end of the day, just the recipe of a good talk is going to be the same.
And what do you look for now with your team when it comes to bringing new speakers into your TEDx events?
So I always go for the idea first. So in fact, what we do, the team kind of get together and we say, okay, here in Luxembourg, what's happening at the moment? What is everybody interested in? And we try and focus on the local market. But of course, at the end of the day, you know, AI is a global phenomenon. So we're desperately looking for people that have a new take on different areas of AI, for example. And then we go and find the speaker. But typically what we'll do is we'll go and find the best qualified person to come and talk about it. So very frequently we'll go to the University of Luxembourg and go and ask. And typically researchers aren't necessarily the most reputable in being passionate and engaging on stage. But so that's what we'll then do. We'll do everything we can to make sure that as long as they're willing to take the feedback, proactively take that feedback and do something about it, we'll work with them and make sure that it just comes across really well on a TED stage.
In the age of AI, why do TEDx talks still matter?
Do they matter? No, I think that's a great question. I think there is something inherent. Actually, this is a conversation I had with my daughters. I have an 18-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old daughter. And of course, one's about to start university and the other one's halfway through. And we were talking about, well, what's worthwhile studying these days? You know, my youngest daughter, she was deciding between being a musician and going to study music, or being a lawyer and going to study law. And so I'm probably the only parent that I've met that's encouraged their children to go off and do music, because I genuinely, firmly believe that the one thing that AI will never be able to replace is the entertainment value, that face-to-face, that interaction. And I think that's where the future is absolutely solid. My other daughter's studying psychology. So as a psychologist, obviously, I'm very happy about that as well. But I feel like in a world of AI, the one thing that people are going to need, probably even more than ever before, is an understanding of what makes them whole, what makes them feel good about their lives. And so I think psychology is definitely a good place to go. So, pushing my daughter to go into music, I think is another one of those things. I don't think she'll ever, as long as her talent remains what it is, and she's a singer-songwriter who's obsessed with Taylor Swift, of course. By the way, as am I. I think I've become a bit of a Swiftie. Yeah. Not undue to her influence, of course, but as it is. But so I think at the end of the day, a TED Talk live in person is always going to be really, really appreciated. So then the question is, if I may be so bold as to reframe your question slightly, what about the online TED Talk? Will that be as valuable as it ever is? And that's a really good question. And I can't pretend that I know the answer because, I've seen, in fact, we've had a TED Talk of a chap in Luxembourg who came to show us AI versions of videos. And sure, I could tell the difference still, but I would hazard a guess, and in a couple of years from now, I might not be able to tell the difference. So, and then, who has the knowledge to deliver? So it is a really concerning, it's a brilliant question, because I think the answer is twofold. Live in person, it is always going to be important. But on video, I don't know. I really, really don't.
You're an exceptional host. And when you host an event, it's a different muscle, yet many of the attributes of being a performer, of being a public speaker, come to fruition. And in some ways, even more because of the need to adapt under pressure, to connect with the audience and be a conduit between the audience, the speaker, and then the audience at home. What are some of the attributes that a host should bring to the table when they're hosting a TEDx event, or any event for that matter, where you have multiple speakers at a CEO event, at a Fortune 500 company event, or any other type of event where you have a group of people and you become that segue into the entire event?
I've got to tell you, it's the one job that I've never trusted for anybody else to do at any of my events. It really is I think you've nailed it. It's really such an important attribute to any event. Now, how do I handle it personally? There's a huge amount of research to be done. So, leading up to an event, I'd compare it slightly. In fact, one of the other really good hosts and facilitators to events that I know is a journalist in Luxembourg. She's an absolutely wonderful person. But when you look at it, she's wonderfully qualified. She's studied at Cambridge, incredibly clever. But what I observed her doing was, I knew that she was going to host an event the following day, but the day before, she was absolutely just chocker. She completely eliminated that day to do anything else because she was doing all the research required. So I think there's a combination. I will do as much research as I can on every area of the conference, all the people speaking at the conference, and also the audience. I'd need to know quite well who's going to be there. So there's the research. I think the other aspect is the experience. So it really is a case of having a lot of experience doing this is something that is potentially irreplaceable. So just knowing how to handle certain things. And And again, the humor aspect is really, really important. So, the stand-up comedies, I mean, you've worked with Saturday Night Live. You know this better than anybody that I know. But just having that ability to almost improvise on the spot, pick up on something, using the correct form of humor, which I mentioned briefly earlier on, all of these things are so fundamentally important. So I think there's a combination of doing a huge amount of research and then jumping in, doing it as much as you can to have the experience so that you can deal with any kind of aspect that comes up, any eventuality, and you know how to go ahead and deal with it because you've done it before. So it's something that I don't micromanage. I don't think any of my team will ever say that Dirk comes in and micromanages. I absolutely trust my team implicitly with the different aspects. But when it comes to hosting an event, I've never let anybody else do it because I don't trust that yet. Maybe one day.
You've been really successful at this. I mean, this is my into knowing you is TEDx events, both in the experience we had 10 years ago, also just following you over the years. What have you learned about yourself as a leader? Maybe 2 or 3 takeaways about the attributes, the successful ways that you've led your team. You said mostly students. Really, though, I would include that or expand that to when I was in Luxembourg with you, I felt you were my leader, right? Like I was looking for you for direction. Everything from the hospitality that you provided for the speakers where we all got together with that epic dinner the night before, which was probably too late. Now I like to go to bed early. Like we were up to like 2 a.m. I'm analyzing people's handwriting that I just met. We're all like connecting. I mean, it was like a little family that a bunch of strangers, and now all of a sudden we're getting to know each other on the fly. Also, you gave me a lot of prep, right? So that was important to make sure my talk was actually more like at about 20 and a half minutes. And I said to my wife, Karen, I was like, oh my God, like I got to get it down to 18 minutes. And I ended up getting down to 18:01, I think, or, just at that point. But I credit getting on the stage while the crew was around me, yet it was giving me that opportunity to really succeed. You set me up for success. So what are a few things you've learned about leading a team that you bring to every TEDx event as the organizer?
Well, thanks for the compliment. I do really appreciate that you acknowledge this atmosphere that was created, and I think that's probably point number one. I feel like everybody needs to enjoy it, and actually, being a leader, organizing a TED event is quite unique. I was dean of a business school for quite a while, and now I have this new project, and I'm leading a reasonable team at the Ministry of Education, starting some form of communication school. But what I find is that when people are working for you, it's a lot easier to be quite assertive and trust that they're going to go ahead and do it. But when people are volunteering, it's a completely different ballpark. People need to enjoy what they're doing. And if they don't, they have no problem walking away, because why on earth should they volunteer their time for something they don't enjoy or something where they become reprimanded at some point? So I think, the point number one is just setting an atmosphere where everybody is enjoying themselves. And I think that's fundamentally important. I do know, and I try and host these speaker dinners. And the reason, of course, why we do it so late is because people are typically flying in or traveling in from all over. And so it is quite difficult to get them all at the same place, which is why, in your case, especially when it was up in the north of the country, we hosted everybody at the same hotel and had the dinner at that hotel. But it was exactly that experience. It was you getting together, so the speakers getting together. They're all feeling the same emotions, because doing a TED Talk is not a little thing. It is quite the bucket list item, shall we say. And just putting everybody into that communal atmosphere and then creating a good environment where people feel like they can trust each other to share their experiences and their feelings. That really does create a sense of community that I think is irreplaceable. People don't want to let each other down, so they will go way above and beyond just in order to help each other. And I think that's just a phenomenal and irreplaceable thing to do. And I compare it occasionally to, it's the kind of, I'd like to build an environment, let's put it this way, where people can feel almost like they have this inherent trust in everybody else. You know, I grew up in a family with two brothers, and occasionally we would get into fights, right? I mean, it's inevitable. But whenever the fight occurred, very shortly afterwards, you know, where there may be a push and a shove and you know, a few aggressive words thrown around, but very shortly afterwards, we just went back into doing what we do, and we were friends again. And not just friends. I mean, there's true love in this environment. But what we knew is that no matter how bad things got, there was always this atmosphere of trust that we could get back together, and things would be fine. I think as long as a team, as long as a leader can facilitate that atmosphere where people can trust each other and trust that they can say what they want to each other, which is a very difficult thing to create. But as long as you do it and lead by example, I think that's key. You know, whenever I go into an environment, I want to enjoy myself. So, and I do. And as a result, a lot of people around me enjoy themselves because it's just a fun environment to be in. So I think that's really, really the key to making sure that, you know, this leadership is successful because the people around you are enjoying what they're doing. Yeah. I think that's sort of the number one thing. And then, of course, just another small aspect, which is preparation. You know, you really, really do need to put the time and the effort in. And my wife always says to me, you don't get paid to do this TED stuff. So why on earth are you putting so much time and effort into doing this? Well, she used to say it in the beginning. Now she knows. But it's just something that I wouldn't replace. It is a lot of time and effort, but I get to know these phenomenal people, create this amazing atmosphere, and I just really enjoy it. It's just it's absolutely lovely. So, but it is a lot of prep. It's a lot of organization and just making sure that everybody is in the right place at the right time and all of those things when it comes to events. Yeah, it's hugely important.
That's such a valuable point. And from a speaker's perspective, I do about 60 talks a year in very different associations, companies, CEO advisory board groups. And the 3 P's that you just mentioned, or if I would reframe, are process, like enjoying the journey, setting the tone as the organizer, a passion, which is one of our themes today, is like you exude passion and humor. And when people meet you, it feels like you're an old friend, like you create that tone. And the 3rd P was preparation. And it wasn't just the event that you created for us as speakers. It really wasn't. It was for us, of course. It was more for the audiences on multiple levels, both the audiences in the castle in Luxembourg, in which we had the UBI Wilts event. Also, it was for the people at home who can feel that palpable energy in the room. And that all starts with the organizer, and everybody takes their cue. Your action speaks so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. And it was the preparation, even your attention to detail with you and the team from the very first time where I got the email, which I remember I was in a gym working out, a public gym, and it said, yeah, you know, you're invited to be a part of this, your number 3 idea, which was my most out of the box idea. And I said, oh my God, I called my wife and I went, oh, this is incredible. But it was, you commented on on what you liked about the slides I was presenting. And you really set it up. So by the time I arrived in Luxembourg, my preparation, which of course on my end had to be quite intense, I felt that the team had my back. And so it was really just stepping into the environment that you had cultivated. And then there it was. I was set up for success before the event, during the event, and then after the event as well, in terms of how you promoted the talk. So what you're saying, I've seen amongst the very best organizers in the world, from associations to conferences to smaller mastermind groups.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And it is something that I've noticed works. And so it's the Albert Bandura's things. How do you know you're self-confident? Because you feel self-efficacy. You feel like what you're doing works, and part of that is getting the positive feedback. So and indeed, when we do organize these events, I feel like the speakers walk away from it really appreciating what's happened. And hence I've just kind of continued on with that. But the other thing, as I said, I just want to have fun as well. What's the point in doing this kind of stuff if you can't enjoy it? So now, having said that, it does occasionally potentially feel to the speakers that I'm being slightly friendly, and I have had a couple of speakers over the last few years that have misunderstood the friendliness for, we're guaranteed a place on your TED stage, and actually we're going to do what we want to do, and if you don't like it, like, you're not going to say no anyway. And sure enough, I mean, I had a guy fly in from Canada who, ironically, who I didn't let him on the stage, and I gave him every email. I was very, very clear in all of the emails. Look, this is what's going to happen. I never told him you wouldn't go on stage, but I told him this had to be ready, otherwise you won't go on stage. So you've got to be firm when required, of course.
Yeah, and without giving the example of the person, what were those things that did not match up to the standards of your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, and not necessarily just speaking about him, but so a TED Talk, there are a lot of rules behind TED Talks. And so a number of those is primarily, I need to hear the very, very final talk. I've got to know what it is. That talk needs to have been prepared over a period of time so that I know the person's ready. So, quite a way in advance, they need to deliver that talk. Now, of course, some people will push that out and not give the talk, or they'll say, okay, I'm ready. And then they say, well, of course, it's going to change a little bit from what it is now, because I don't like to script out my talks. I like to be a little bit spontaneous. And that's fair enough. That's fine. People can have their own methods of delivery. However, when it comes to the day before, and hence that's why people have flown over and they're still at that point where they're saying, well, it's going to be kind of spontaneous, then it's like, okay, but now I'd like you to be spontaneous now. I want to know exactly what talk it's going to be. And so it's for the rules, in order to make sure that they do live up to the rules and expectations of an audience. If you have 1,000 people in the room, they're going to expect a certain type of talk, and they need to live up to that. Otherwise, I haven't just disappointed one speaker, I've disappointed 1,000 people that came to watch. But so there's that element of the rules and regulations. But I think the other thing is, a TED event is, it's mostly half a day, and it's almost a festival of talks, and that's quite difficult if you think about it. I mean, if I go and listen to a festival of music, it's fabulous. There are different varieties of music. But if I just go and listen to somebody talking for 20 minutes, and then another 20 minutes, another 20 minutes, it becomes almost impossible to digest all of this information. So there needs to be a really good flow to the event, so and that's the wonderful thing about being the host, is that I can walk on stage. I see the audience are all standing there or sitting there, excited. And then when that speaker walks off, I'll walk on stage and I'll see that 90% of the audience have a tissue out and they're crying, and they're, and then I'll pep them back up a little bit to prepare them for the next one. And then I walk on stage after the following speaker and they're all still laughing because they're, there was full chuckles the whole way through. And then the next person comes on stage and they're all just standing there or sitting there in bewilderment. Like, how is this even possible? And they've completely changed their perspective on things. So just to see that wonderful effect through the audience. So when we build a TED event, we're really building that flow. So if I don't know what a speaker is going to say, I don't know where to put that person in the order of the event. So it becomes super, super difficult. And so I really, really need to know all of that.
What's a recent example of a talk that really stood out to you for some of the things we're talking about today, in connecting with the audience, to bringing forth the type of preparation, big idea, and passion that your vision is for your events?
Yeah, so a good example of a talk, I do a lot of talks, especially recently, with youth. So one of the things we've done in Luxembourg is we've launched a national idea competition. And so this is something that we send out to all of the students. So every student in the country receives this email inviting them to submit their idea. And so we collect all of these ideas, and then we have a panel, and the finalists come and present in front of the panel. And then we'll choose the top 2 or top 3 speakers. It's only ever supposed to be 2, but I can never choose. So it always ends up being 3. And they come on stage. Now, one of these talks was a young lady by the name of Cecilia Rydell, and she's a visually impaired student, and she's obsessed with judo. And you wonder, well, how can a visually impaired student be good at judo? But it's absolutely incredible. So this girl came up on stage, and she presented with just such vigor and being so animated. And then she gave an example of what she does, bearing in mind she's 12 years old when she came to do this talk. So she came up on stage, and her trainer was the former Austrian world champion, big burly guy, and she's just a small little 12-year-old petite girl. I mean, she's really, to look at her, you wouldn't expect her to be a judo athlete. But, she's so good with her technique. She flipped this guy who is more than twice her weight, just bang over the shoulders. But what she did was she came in and she delivered with the kind of passion that we were talking about, her body language, her voice. It was phenomenal to see. She gave a good example. So she engaged the audience, and she would always describe what she was doing while she was doing it. So she'd, do the move, pick up the microphone and talk about it, and then put the microphone down and back. So it was really, really well prepared. So I think that's a good example of one of my speakers anyway, that really responded very, very well to the coaching. And it was just brilliant on stage. And I have to say, by the way, Jamie, so about a week really before the event, I invited all the National Idea Competition winners, so the 3 of them, onto the radio. So they were interviewed by RTL Radio, so Radio Television Luxembourg, RTL. And they were interviewed. And the 2 other speakers were really quite well spoken. They were a little bit older as well. But Celia was, I think, of course, she's 12. She's a little bit nervous. And so when it came to responding to the radio host, she was really so quiet and so softly spoken. And I was standing there at the back of the room, and suddenly this just panic set over me, thinking, my word, in about a week, she has to be on stage to deliver her talk in front of some 500 people at that event. Yeah. I'm praying at this point. So I said to her after the talk, well done, after the radio, well done. I think we should meet again maybe tomorrow. Would that be okay? But what she ended up delivering was just phenomenal. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I have an 11 and 12-year-old, and speaking in front of 500 people live, that in itself, as you know, as a parent of kids who are a little bit older, is an extraordinary accomplishment on any level. Dirk, what role does AI have in public speaking, if at all, in terms of the development of ideas, the preparation, and beyond?
Gosh, so I have to tell you, we just starting off that answer. There's really such an array of responses to AI, and as a teacher, I had a choice as well. The Ministry of Education in Luxembourg sent out an email to all the teachers saying, you may not forbid the use of AI. Now, having said that, the majority of teachers, while they technically don't forbid AI, what they're doing is they're saying you can't use AI to do this particular part of the assignment. So I thought, well, I have a choice here. I can either prepare my students to be ready for the use of AI, or I can go back to teaching the way that I've always taught and just, ignoring that AI even exists. So I developed my very first assignment of the year. So in September, when they came to school, I gave all of my students an assignment. I put an essay title on the board, and I said to them, okay, go ahead. This is your essay, and I'd like you to submit this in 3 days. And they were like, oh, well, it's straightforward. So one caveat, you're not allowed to write the essay. And then slight confusion in the room. So it's 400 students, first-year students sitting there going, what do you mean? I said, you can use any AI tool that you want. But of course, at the time in September, really, there was only ChatGPT. And I think it was even 3.5. So they all used ChatGPT to write this essay. But I said, I'm going to mark you, not on your essay. I'm going to mark you on your critique of the essay. So I'd like you to mark the essay like I would mark your essays. And so I gave them all the criteria that I wanted them to mark the essays on. And sure enough, in that exercise in September, not a single student came back without ChatGPT having given them an error of a factual nature. So it had made stuff up. And I know this is all probably quite common now that everybody knows. But it really created a mindset shift in the students that the way they had to use ChatGPT would be to assist them, but they needed to have the final control. So, and I think that is something we need to embrace moving into the world of public speaking, the preparation of it. I think it is very, very good as a research tool, but you need to be able to verify everything that you're given. It's very, very good at creating a structure to a presentation. Yeah. It's actually brilliant to do that. And I've got to say, I use it myself. So actually, I use it for a lot of things. Even when it's organizing events, I'll put in my entire to-do list and say, what am I missing? And it inevitably comes out with something that I possibly haven't thought of or forgot. So it's very, very useful. When it comes through to the delivery, I think here there's a little bit of I'm not sure that it's quite there. I've seen some variations of software that listens to you and gives you feedback on the sound, the pitch of your voice, the volume, the intonation, that kind of thing, the speed of your voice. But I'm not sure that's a reliable form of feedback. So I certainly wouldn't use that. Having said that, I've been developing a piece of software with a chap in Luxembourg, Matt Brachetti. He runs a company called Virtual Rangers. And one of the things that he's done is he's created, through 3D goggles, he's created a room, an environment where an audience is responding to what they say. So when somebody talks and you sort of crack a joke, then the audience begin to laugh. So I think that there is certainly a bit of use to that, where when you are preparing your talk, sort of putting yourself in an environment where you're standing in front of a group of people, albeit virtually, I think it's still effective. It tricks the brain enough to give you a good atmosphere to practice in. So, I mean, it's developing so quickly. I've no doubt that my answer of today will probably be completely irrelevant in 3 months. But yeah, I'm really excited as to what's happening, and I'm certainly keeping an eye out on it.
Yeah, count me as one of the first users of that virtual device. I think that would be really effective in the preparation process, which practicing, no matter how experienced you become as a speaker, and this is not just from me, this is from my friends who are even doing this longer than I have, it's never a fun, I can't wait to spend hours practicing in my house or in front of others to make it look effortless when you get on stage, but yet it's an important component. So if you can simulate the audience beforehand and make it even fun to practice, then I believe speakers like me would jump at that.
Yeah, I think it is working. So we've tried it now already with a group of lawyers in a very large law firm in Luxembourg, and we're about to try it with a group of job seekers in terms of prepping them for sort of one-on-one interview and that kind of thing. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and Matt's brilliant at this kind of stuff. He's got a phenomenal team that are brilliant with AI and virtual reality. So. Yeah, but absolutely. I'll give you the details, and hopefully there's a way of getting that software over to you.
Perfect. So TEDx is your passion project that's ongoing. You also spoke about being a teacher or a professor. If people wanted to get a hold of you, who were speakers, business leaders, to work with you, to consult, tell us a little bit about that and where they would reach out to you.
Yeah, sure. I'm So I'm predominantly based in Luxembourg now, while I still live technically in Brussels. I used to do a lot of work at the European Parliament, so coaching speakers, at least politicians, um, which was great. And hence I'm based in Brussels. And the Middlesex University had a business school called UBI, which I was dean of, and that was based in Brussels. But then we opened a campus in Luxembourg, which is the one that you came to. And then subsequently, we opened a campus in China, in Shanghai, which was quite the experience. But shortly afterwards, then I started working at the Ministry of Education. So what I do now, I'm working on a project together with the University of Luxembourg to fully identify how can we teach students and also what's the correct age. And I think I've already finished. And I think it's 16 years old. So all the evidence so far shows that the 16-year-olds are very, very responsive. So at what age can we teach them, and how can we teach them public speaking skills so that they're ready? Because what we found by doing quite a lot of quantitative research, we found that a lot of the adults that fear public speaking, like really have a dread of doing it, they typically can point to a point in time at high school where this started. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to address how can teachers adequately teach the science behind public speaking so that a student can still intellectualize the process and understand that while what they experienced was a humiliating experience, it was only because they didn't do it correctly. And everything's humiliating if you don't do it correctly. If you sit down at a piano and try and play piano and you don't know how, and you haven't got practice, you haven't done any practice, you're going to humiliate yourself. So, but if you know how to do it correctly, and the science is very clear on what public speaking works, then certainly that's what we should be able to teach them. So we're in the process of doing that. So I'm predominantly based at the University of Luxembourg at the moment. And I also work with an organization called the CNFPC, the Centre National de Formation Professionnelle Continue. And what we do is we teach people in companies. And so we do public speaking teaching, everything from public speaking through to negotiation skills and all that kind of thing. So I've been working in communication for quite a long time. And I do a lot of training at the House of Startups for entrepreneurs, because I think the entrepreneurs have to be the single most rewarding experience, because when you help an entrepreneur with a pitch and they win the pitch and they win the funding, it's life-changing for them. So that's just a brilliant thing to do. So I guess the best way to contact me is through my website, dirkdaenen.com. And if people are interested, if people are in the area, they're most welcome to come to any of the trainings that we give through the CNFPC or at the University of Luxembourg. So yeah, absolutely. It'd be lovely to hear from people.
And as I mentioned at the beginning, working with you and the opportunity you gave me, I'm grateful for then, and I'm grateful for now. It accelerated my confidence as a professional speaker. The advice you gave me in the process was instrumental to laying a foundation of everything that came after that. So I really want to thank you for making the time today and for catching up on this 10th year anniversary of working together at TEDx.
Dirk. Incredible, isn't it? 10 years. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jamie. That's really nice of you to say. But I really learned so much from you also in the process. It's phenomenal.
Thank you. This is Signature Leadership. And if you want to hear more world-class leaders, subscribe and leave a review. Thank you.